Nalo stood there that day, watching as her family made a big show out of giving her brother Deka a brand new house. Everyone clapped, cheered, and hugged him like he was some kind of king. And then came her turn. They smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that hides mockery. They handed her a small envelope. Inside, just a cheap lottery ticket. They laughed and said, "Maybe you'll get lucky," like it was some funny joke. Nalo forced a smile, but inside, her heart sank. She could feel their laughter cutting through her like a knife. No one thought she would ever amount to anything. They treated her gift like trash, while her brother got praised like a hero. But that night, sitting alone in her little rented room, Nalo stared at that ticket. For a moment, she thought about throwing it in the trash, but something told her to scratch it. Her hands trembled as she slowly revealed the numbers. One by one, they matched. Her eyes widened. Her breath stopped. $10 million. 10 million. She blinked, thinking maybe she was dreaming. But no, it was real. The numbers were real. She checked again and again, and each time, her heart pounded harder. The same family that laughed at her, the same people who thought they could toss her aside. They had no idea that in that moment, everything had changed. The joke wasn't on Nalo anymore. It was on them, and the world that once looked down on her was about to watch her rise. From the time Nalo was a little girl, she always knew she was treated differently. Her brother Deka was the star of the family. Everyone praised him for even the smallest things. When he brought home average grades, they celebrated like he won a gold medal. When he asked for something, they rushed to give it to him. No questions asked. But Nalo, no matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. She studied late into the night, worked harder than anyone, and still, no one clapped for her. She cleaned, she cooked, she helped around the house, hoping maybe this time they would notice her, but they never did. Whenever guests came over, her parents showed off Deka like a trophy. "Look at our brilliant son," they would say with pride. And Nalo would stand quietly in the corner, smiling softly, even though her heart felt heavy. She wanted to be loved too. She wanted them to look at her the way they looked at Deka, with eyes full of pride and joy. But that day never came. Instead, she got used to being second, to being the one who got leftover love and leftover praise. At birthdays, Deka got big gifts: bicycles, game consoles, expensive shoes. Nalo got clothes that were on sale or hand-me-downs that no one else wanted. Even during family dinners, Deka's favourite food was cooked with care, while Nalo's likes were forgotten. She told herself it didn't matter, but deep inside, every little thing added up. The pain grew quietly inside her heart, and she carried it everywhere she went. At school, she tried to shine, hoping maybe if she made her family proud, they would finally see her worth. But every time she brought home good results, they barely nodded. "Good," they said, before turning back to Deka, who always got the loud cheers. It hurt more than she could explain. She loved her family so much, but it felt like no matter how much love she gave, she only got a small piece in return. Nalo kept smiling on the outside, because that's what she learned to do. But inside, she cried quietly, asking herself why she was never enough. She wasn't jealous of Deka. She just wanted to be seen, to be valued, to be loved the way every child deserves. But year after year, that dream stayed far away, and as she grew older, the pain only sank deeper, like a silent wound that no one noticed but her. That day, the family gathered like they always did, smiling and laughing, pretending everything was perfect. Nalo came, even though deep down, she already knew how it would go. She had been to these gatherings before. It was always the same. Her brother Deka in the spotlight, and her left in the background. But still, she hoped maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, they would make her feel special too. As everyone sat down, her parents stood up and announced they had big surprises. The room got quiet, and Nalo's heart started to race. She looked around, hoping, praying they would say her name with pride this time. But no, all eyes turned to Deka. Her father reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny key. "This is for our dear son," he said. "A brand new house, fully paid. He deserves it." The room exploded with cheers. People clapped. Some even stood up to hug Deka. He smiled wide, soaking in the praise like he always did. Nalo sat there, forcing a small smile, but inside, her heart cracked a little more. Then, almost as an afterthought, her mother turned to her and said, "And for you, Nalo, we got this." She handed her a thin envelope. Nalo opened it slowly, her fingers trembling a little. Inside was a cheap lottery ticket. That was it. No key, no big announcement, just a ticket. They laughed and said, "Who knows? Maybe you'll get lucky." Everyone chuckled like it was the funniest thing. They called it fun, but to Nalo, it felt like a slap. The sting in her chest was sharp, and she struggled to hold back the tears that wanted to fall. She looked around the room, hoping someone would see how hurt she was, hoping someone would say, "This isn't right." But no one did. They were too busy celebrating Decca's new house, too busy praising him to notice her pain. She sat there quietly, feeling small and invisible. It was like all those years of being second best had gathered in that one moment, crushing her from the inside. Nalo smiled through the pain, nodded politely, and said thank you, because that's what she had always done. But inside, her heart was screaming. She wanted to get up and leave, to run far away from the people who only saw her as less. But she stayed seated, her hands gripping that cheap ticket, while the room continued to cheer for Decca. And right there, in the middle of all the noise and laughter, Nalo felt more alone than she ever had before. That night, Nalo sat alone in her small, quiet apartment. The place was so tiny, she could hear every creak of the old floor and the hum of the fridge. She looked at the lottery ticket lying on her table. It was the same ticket they had thrown at her like a joke. She picked it up, stared at it, and for a moment, she felt like tossing it into the trash. Why bother? She had never been lucky in her life. Everything she got, she had to fight for, while her brother got things handed to him like gifts from the sky. But something deep inside her whispered, "Scratch it." So she grabbed an old coin from her drawer, took a deep breath, and started scratching. Her hands were a little shaky. Maybe it was from the long day, or maybe it was from all the emotions still boiling in her chest from the family gathering. As she scratched off the silver lines, her eyes widened. The first number matched. Her heart gave a tiny jump. Then she scratched the second one, and that matched too. Now her hands were trembling for real. By the time she uncovered the last number, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. All the numbers matched. Her heart was pounding so loud, it was the only sound she could hear. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. But no, the numbers were right there, clear as day. $10 million. $10 million. Her breath caught in her throat, and she had to grab the edge of the table to steady herself. Tears welled up in her eyes. But this time, they weren't from pain. They were from pure shock and disbelief. The same woman they mocked, the one they always treated like she was less, had just won more money than they could ever dream of. Her whole body shook. Her heart raced faster and faster. She looked around her little apartment, the cracked walls, the second-hand furniture, and then back at the ticket. Her mind was spinning. Was this real? Could this really be happening to her? She stood up, pacing the room, holding the ticket close to her chest, like it was the most precious thing in the world. The woman they laughed at, the one they gave a worthless ticket to, was now richer than all of them combined. The same family, who had given her nothing but pain, had just handed her the key to a new life, without even knowing it. Nalo sank to the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. In that moment, everything changed. The joke was no longer on her. The joke was on them. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Nalo's life changed overnight. The family that had always ignored her suddenly couldn't stop calling her phone. Cousins who never even remembered her birthday were now calling her my sweet sister and my favorite cousin. Aunts who used to walk past her like she was invisible were now telling her how much they had always loved her. Her phone didn't stop ringing. One after the other, they called, pretending to be so happy for her, pretending they had always cared. They started sending her sweet messages, calling her the precious daughter and the shining light of the family. Some even showed up at her apartment with big smiles and open arms, acting like they had always been close. They brought small gifts, flowers, and tried to hug her like they were her biggest supporters. But Nalo wasn't fooled. Deep in her heart, she knew this was all fake. She remembered how they used to treat her, how they laughed when they gave her that lottery ticket, how they cheered only for her brother, and how they made her feel like she was nothing. Now, because of the money, they wanted to rewrite history. They wanted to act like they had always been by her side. But every sweet word they said felt like poison to her. She remembered every tear she had cried when they made her feel small. She remembered standing alone while they celebrated her brother. No amount of fake love could erase that pain. Even her brother Decker, who had always looked down on her, called her that day. He suddenly started calling her sister dearest and said he was so proud of her. He even said they should stick together as family now. Nalo listened to his words, but in her heart, she could feel the jealousy hiding behind his fake smile. She could see through every lie, every sweet word, and every forced hug. As more and more relatives reached out trying to get close, Nalo felt a strange strength growing inside her. She wasn't the same girl they used to mock. She was no longer the weak one who would cry quietly in her room. Now, she had the power, and she could choose who stayed in her life. She smiled politely at their words, but in her heart, she made a promise to herself. She would never forget how they made her feel when she had nothing, and no amount of money or fake love would make her trust them again. Nalo knew the truth, and this time, she wouldn't let them hurt her, not ever again. Decker, the brother who had always been the family's favorite, couldn't hide his true feelings anymore. At first, he tried to act happy for Nalo. He smiled and said all the right things, but deep down, his heart was burning with jealousy. He couldn't believe that the sister they all used to look down on was now richer than everyone else. The house their parents gave him suddenly didn't feel so special anymore. Everywhere he went, people were talking about Nalo and her big win. No one was cheering for him now. It didn't take long before Decker showed his real face. He called Nalo and said she should share her $10 million winnings. He said, "Family comes first, Nalo. You can't forget us now that you have money." He reminded her about all the times they had spent together, pretending they had always been close. But Nalo listened quietly, her heart growing colder with every word he spoke. She remembered how he used to laugh when their parents favored him and ignored her. She remembered every birthday he got grand parties, while she got nothing. Now, he wanted to act like they were best friends. As days passed, Decker's demands grew louder. He told their parents that Nalo was being selfish. He complained to uncles and aunts, turning them against her. Soon, the whole family started calling her, saying she had to give money to Decker because he is your brother, and you must help family. But Nalo had heard enough. All her life, she had been second best. She had watched them shower Decker with love while giving her scraps. Now that she finally had something, they wanted to snatch it away in the name of family. Nalo stood her ground. She told Decker, "No, not this time." Her voice was calm, but inside, she felt powerful. She wasn't going to let them bully her again. This money was her chance to finally live her life on her own terms. Decker's jealousy only grew worse. He started saying nasty things about her in public, trying to make her look bad. He claimed she was ungrateful and heartless. The family started fighting among themselves. Some sided with Nalo, while others backed Decker. What started as a lottery win quickly turned into a family war. The people who once laughed together were now shouting and pointing fingers. But through it all, Nalo stayed strong. She had tasted the bitterness of being treated like she was less all her life, and she had made a decision. She was never going back to that dark place. No matter how much they shouted, no matter how much Decker begged or demanded, she wasn't giving up her power. Not this time. Not ever again. Nalo could feel the pressure from every side. Her family kept calling, begging, demanding. They wanted her to hand over her money, to share it like it was theirs. But Nalo had made up her mind. She remembered every tear she cried when they treated her like she was nothing. And now that she had everything, she decided to use her blessing in a way that would make real change, not to feed the greed of those who once made her feel small. So instead of giving her millions to people who never valued her, Nalo made a powerful move. She started using her money to build something bigger. First, she opened businesses in her town. She created jobs for people who were struggling, just like she once was. She hired women who had been overlooked, women who had dreams, but no one to help them. Nalo knew their pain because she had lived it, and now she was their light in the darkness. But she didn't stop there. Nalo took a big step and started funding charities. She gave money to schools so little girls could get an education. She supported shelters for women who had no place to go. Everywhere her name appeared, it brought hope. People who had never even met her felt inspired by her courage and kindness. Soon, Nalo's face was on billboards across the country. Her story was shared on TV, in newspapers, and on the internet. Everyone was talking about the girl who went from being the forgotten daughter to a national hero. People admired her not just because she was rich, but because she turned her pain into purpose. She showed the world that you could rise above hate and rejection and still choose to help others. As her fame grew, more and more people reached out to her, thanking her for giving them hope. Young girls wrote letters saying they wanted to be strong like her. Mothers cried tears of joy because Nalo's donations helped their children go to school. Nalo felt a deep happiness she had never felt before. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to feel the way she once did. Broken, unloved, and forgotten. And through it all, Nalo stayed true to herself. She didn't let fame change her heart. She kept working hard, building more businesses and helping more people. Her name became a symbol of strength and kindness. The same family that once laughed at her now watched in silence as she rose higher and higher. Nalo had turned her pain into power, and her story touched the hearts of millions. She became living proof that no matter how badly life or people treat you, you can rise, shine, and change the world. As Nalo's name grew bigger and brighter, her family's world started falling apart. The same people who once looked down on her were now drowning in their own problems. Deka, her brother, who once bragged about his big, beautiful house, was now in trouble. He had made bad choices, spending money like it would never run out. He took risky loans, made foolish deals, and trusted the wrong people. Before long, his house, the one they all cheered about, was taken away by the bank. Foreclosure signs went up, and the neighbors whispered about how fast things had changed. But it wasn't just Deka. The whole family began to crumble. Relatives who once acted so proud started turning against each other. They fought over small bits of money, blaming one another for their failures. Arguments broke out at family meetings. Cousins who once laughed together now refused to speak. Uncles and aunties accused each other of stealing and lying. Their greed had taken over, and it was tearing them apart from the inside. They had all believed that Nalo would hand over her millions, that she would save them like a golden ticket. But when she chose to build her own path instead, their true colours showed. They didn't know how to stand on their own because they had spent their lives waiting for handouts. And now, with no one to bail them out, their world collapsed. Some tried to copy Nalo's success, but they didn't have her heart, her hard work, or her purpose. They wanted quick riches, but ended up with bigger debts. Shops they opened failed. Investments turned to dust. Even the few who managed to get some money soon lost it because greed and jealousy blinded them. They wanted the glory without the struggle, the reward without the sacrifice. As the family sank deeper into trouble, people around them started seeing the truth. The same neighbors who once praised Deka and mocked Nalo now shook their heads in pity. They saw how the family, once so proud and loud, was now desperate and broken. Meanwhile, Nalo's light kept shining brighter. While her family scrambled for crumbs, she stood tall, admired, and respected. She watched quietly as the same people who laughed at her downfall were now facing their own. It was not revenge she felt, but a deep, calm victory. She had risen above their cruelty, and now their greed had become their own punishment. Her family's downfall became a lesson to everyone watching. When you build your life on greed, lies, and pride, it will one day crash. And those you once mocked might be the ones who rise while you fall. Nalo's story spread even wider, not just as a tale of success, but as a warning about the danger of letting greed consume your heart. The day came when Deka couldn't hold back his anger anymore. He agreed to a live interview on TV, hoping to turn people against Nalo. The cameras were rolling and millions were watching. Deka sat there with a forced smile, but inside, he was boiling with jealousy. He pointed his finger at Nalo and said she had forgotten her family, that she had become rich and proud and left them to suffer. His voice was loud, his words sharp. He wanted the world to believe that Nalo was heartless, that she turned her back on the people who raised her. But Nalo didn't flinch. She sat quietly, her face calm, her eyes steady. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't shout, she didn't argue, she simply told the truth that had been hidden for years. She spoke about how she grew up always being less, how she was treated like she didn't matter while Deka got everything. She told the crowd how they laughed at her pain, how they tossed her aside and only came back when she had money. Her words were simple, but they cut deep. The audience listened in silence at first, and then whispers started. People began nodding, feeling her pain. The host of the show looked shocked too, and then Nalo said something that made the whole place erupt. She said, "Family is not about using someone until they break. Family is about love and respect. And I got neither from you." The crowd exploded in cheers and claps. People stood up, shouting her name. Decca's face turned white. The man who once stood tall as the golden sun was now shrinking in his seat. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He had been exposed, live in front of the whole world. His lies, his greed, his jealousy, all laid bare. The interview clip spread like wildfire online. Everyone was sharing it. People praised Nalo for her courage, her strength, and her honesty. They called her a queen, a hero for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly by their own family. Decca, on the other hand, became a symbol of shame. Memes and jokes about him flooded the internet. The man who tried to destroy Nalo's image ended up destroying his own. Nalo's calm and powerful words that day changed everything. She didn't just win the argument, she won the hearts of people everywhere. And Decca, with his head down and his face pale, knew that he had lost, not just the fight, but the respect of everyone who once cheered for him. It was a moment that would be remembered forever. After everything, Nalo stood tall, not with anger, but with strength. She looked back at all the pain they caused her, the years of being treated like she didn't matter, the cruel jokes, the way they tossed that lottery ticket at her like she was a joke. But instead of letting that pain turn into hate, Nalo chose something bigger. She forgave them, but she set her rules. She made it clear no one would ever use her again, not even family. The door to her heart was open for love, but closed forever to greed and lies. With her millions, Nalo didn't just buy fancy things. She built schools in places where girls like her were told they couldn't dream big. She started programs to help women stand on their own feet, so they would never have to beg for love or approval like she once did. Every building she opened, every girl she helped, was a message to the world. You can't crush someone just because they're quiet or humble. That cheap ticket they mocked her with, she turned it into her crown, the crown of a queen who rose from rejection and pain. People from everywhere started looking up to her. News channels called her an inspiration. Girls who once felt small began to believe in their own worth. Nalo's story traveled far and wide, not as the girl who won the lottery, but as the woman who turned an insult into an empire. She became a symbol of hope, showing that even when the world laughs at you, you can rise and shine brighter than them all. And her final message was simple but powerful. Never underestimate the quiet one. Never think the person you ignore today won't become the person you admire tomorrow. Her words touched hearts, sparked tears, and gave strength to those who felt unseen. Nalo had triumphed, not just in money, but in purpose. She showed that the best revenge is success, and the sweetest victory is lifting others up while standing tall yourself. The world would never forget her. And every time someone tried to belittle the quiet, the humble, the overlooked, they would remember Nalo's story, the story of the girl they thought was worthless, who became worth more than all of them put together.